"Are you seriously wearing that on a plane?" One of the flight attendants whispered loudly enough for the other crew members to hear. They all glanced at the mother in the third row, their smirks poorly hidden behind fake smiles. Her faded jeans were patched at the knees, and the oversized sweater she wore looked several years old. The woman didn't react. She just hugged her little daughter closer, trying to settle the girl into the seat. The whispers grew louder. "Looks like she came straight out of a thrift store," another attendant muttered, chuckling as if the poor woman's clothes were some sort of joke. Passengers nearby pretended not to hear, but the discomfort in their eyes said otherwise. The mother's cheeks burned, though she never spoke up. She pulled her sweater sleeves down, as if trying to hide herself. But then it happened. A tall man in a sharp navy suit, sitting just a few rows back, slowly stood. His presence immediately shifted the atmosphere. The billionaire passenger everyone secretly recognized but didn't expect to see on this flight. Daniel Carter, known for his bold business moves and philanthropy, had been watching quietly. Now, his eyes narrowed as he looked at the crew, his deep voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. "Enough. Do you think mocking her makes you better than her?" The plane went silent. Every eye turned toward him, stunned. The crew froze, unsure how to respond. The mother gasped softly, clutching her daughter tighter, not believing someone had finally spoken up for her. And just as Daniel Carter took a step forward, preparing to say something that would shake everyone on that flight, the captain's announcement suddenly interrupted, filling the cabin with static. But before we get to that moment, let's go back to where it all began. It started at the small, crowded airport in Dallas that morning. The sun was barely up, but already lines of travelers snaked around the check-in counters. Among them stood Rebecca Hayes, a single mother in her early 30s, clutching the hand of her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Rebecca's hair was tied in a loose ponytail, and her clothes, though clean, showed their age. The sweater had once been her mother's, and the jeans she wore had been mended more than once. Rebecca wasn't rich. She worked 2 jobs, one at a diner and another cleaning offices at night, just to keep food on the table and pay for Lily's school. This trip wasn't for luxury. She was flying to New York because Lily had been selected for a small scholarship program that required them to attend an interview in person. Rebecca knew this could be life-changing for her daughter. She had saved for months just to afford the tickets. "Mommy, do we have enough snacks?" Lily asked in her tiny voice as they stood in line. Rebecca knelt and smiled, even though exhaustion weighed heavy on her eyes. "We'll be fine, sweetie. Remember, this is an adventure." But adventure didn't feel like the right word as they dragged their old suitcase across the glossy airport floors. People in crisp suits, designer shoes, and shiny luggage brushed past them, barely glancing at the mother and daughter who looked so out of place. By the time they reached security, Rebecca's heart was already pounding. She hated airports. She hated the stairs. She hated the unspoken judgment that came with being poor in a place filled with people who seemed to have everything. But she swallowed her pride and focused on Lily, determined not to let her daughter see her fear. The flight boarding process was chaotic as always. First-class passengers strutted ahead, business class followed, and then economy passengers were slowly funneled through. Rebecca clutched their boarding passes tightly, making sure not to lose them. When they finally stepped onto the plane, Rebecca felt the stares almost immediately. Her sweater, her patched jeans, even her daughter's hand-me-down shoes. They all seemed to scream poor in a place where appearances mattered too much. She tried to ignore it. She guided Lily to their seats in the third row and began helping her settle down. That's when the whispers started. "Look at her sweater. Those jeans. Doesn't she know people can see her?" Rebecca heard every word but pretended not to. She couldn't afford to break down in front of her daughter. Instead, she whispered, "It's okay, baby. We'll just sit here quietly, and soon we'll be in the air." But things only got worse. One of the flight attendants, her name tag read Melissa, smiled politely at another crew member while pointing not so subtly toward Rebecca. "I guess not everyone believes in dressing for the occasion." The others snickered, shaking their heads. Rebecca's cheeks burned, but she stayed silent. Lily looked up, confused. "Mommy, why are they laughing?" Rebecca forced a smile. "They're just talking, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. But inside, her heart was breaking. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was humiliated. Passengers nearby exchanged awkward looks, but no one spoke up. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, pretending to scroll through their phones. Others smirked along, too afraid of standing out themselves. And then, just when Rebecca thought she couldn't take any more, the unexpected happened. From a few rows back, Daniel Carter slowly rose to his feet, tall, confident, and instantly recognizable to those who followed the news. His presence was like a thunderclap in the quiet cabin. People whispered his name, some gasped outright. Daniel didn't look at the passengers. He looked straight at the crew. His voice was firm, low, but carried across the plane. Enough. Do you think mocking her makes you better than her? The flight attendants froze. Passengers went wide-eyed. Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea who the man was, but the weight in his voice made her feel as if an entire army stood behind her. And just as Daniel prepared to step forward, to do something that would change the course of this flight forever, the overhead speakers crackled. The captain's voice came through, sharp and unexpected. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a small issue before takeoff. Please remain seated. Every head turned upward. Rebecca's pulse raced. Daniel stopped mid-step, his gaze still locked on the crew. The attendants looked rattled, unsure whether to respond to him or focus on the announcement. The tension inside the cabin was unbearable. Everyone knew something was about to happen. But what? The captain's voice filled the cabin, sharp and uneasy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a small issue before takeoff. Please remain seated. Every passenger froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Rebecca's heart began to hammer as her eyes darted around the plane. Lily clutched her arm tightly. "Mommy, what's wrong with the plane?" the little girl whispered. Rebecca forced a smile even though her throat felt tight. "It's nothing, baby. They'll fix it." But inside, fear and shame collided. First, the humiliation of the crew mocking her. Now this? She wanted the flight to just take off, for this nightmare to be over. Daniel Carter, however, didn't sit down. His tall frame remained planted firmly in the aisle, his eyes still locked on the crew. The announcement hadn't shaken him. If anything, it seemed to fuel him more. "I'll ask again," his voice carried, steady and cutting. "Do you think mocking a mother and child makes you better than them?" The attendants shifted nervously. Melissa, the one who had started the whispers, tried to regain her composure. She forced a plastic smile. "Sir, please take your seat. We need everyone seated until the captain gives further instructions." Daniel didn't move. His gaze narrowed, and the silence in the cabin pressed heavier with every second. Passengers leaned forward, holding their breath. Nobody dared interrupt. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his tone sharper. "Respect is not optional. You're entrusted with people's safety and dignity. Mocking passengers shows neither." A ripple went through the plane. Some passengers nodded subtly. Others stared at the crew, waiting for their response. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She had never seen anyone stand up for her like this. Melissa's forced smile faltered. Her fellow attendants exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Yet before anyone could respond, the captain's voice came back over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a minor technical check, we'll be delayed for approximately 20 minutes. Please remain calm and seated." The tension shifted again. People groaned, muttering complaints about missed connections and wasted time. The attendants used the distraction to avoid Daniel's stare, moving quickly to check overhead compartments and pretend nothing had happened. But the damage was already done. Everyone had seen the moment. Everyone had felt the weight of Daniel's words. Rebecca lowered her gaze, embarrassed by all the eyes that had fallen on her. Yet at the same time, she felt a strange spark of hope. Maybe this man wasn't like the others. Maybe kindness still existed in the world. The delay dragged on. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. The cabin grew restless. Children fussed. Businessmen sighed loudly, and phones buzzed with messages passengers couldn't answer in airplane mode. Rebecca kept Lily distracted by pointing out things in the Seaback magazine. Look, sweetheart, see that picture? That's New York. Those tall buildings are called skyscrapers. Lily's eyes widened. Are we really going there? Rebecca smiled softly. Yes, and you're going to do amazing at your interview. Her daughter giggled, the sound light in the heavy air. But Rebecca noticed a shadow nearby. Daniel Carter had taken his seat again, just across the aisle from them. He wasn't looking at his phone or computer like the other wealthy passengers. Instead, he watched quietly, as though studying the interaction between mother and daughter. It made Rebecca nervous. Why would a man like him pay attention to someone like her? She tried to ignore it, but she could feel his gaze, calm yet intense. Meanwhile, Melissa and the other attendants whispered at the back of the plane. Their faces were stiff with forced professionalism, but underneath, embarrassment simmered. They had been called out in front of everyone. By Daniel Carter, of all people. They knew passengers would talk. They knew the incident would spread. Melissa's jaw tightened. She had worked this job for 6 years and prided herself on being perfect. But now, because of one poor mother and some billionaire's sharp tongue, her reputation on this flight was cracked, and she hated it. Finally, the captain's voice returned. We've been cleared for departure. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for takeoff. Relief washed through the passengers. People adjusted their seatbelts. Phones clicked off, and conversations rose again. Rebecca held Lily's hand tightly, whispering, Here we go, baby. It's going to feel funny in your tummy, but it's safe. The engines roared. The plane began to roll down the runway, faster and faster, until the ground fell away beneath them. Lily squealed in excitement, gripping Rebecca's arm. We're flying, Mommy. Rebecca laughed softly despite her nerves. Yes, sweetheart, we're flying. For a brief moment, it felt almost normal. The humiliation from earlier seemed to fade as the clouds swallowed the view. But normal never lasts long when pride and power are in play. 30 minutes into the flight, when most passengers had settled into movies or naps, the attendants began their beverage service. Melissa pushed the cart down the aisle with stiff, robotic politeness. She avoided Daniel's gaze completely, her smile stretched thin. When she reached Rebecca's row, she forced the same sugary tone she gave every passenger. Would you like something to drink? Rebecca hesitated, uncomfortable under the woman's gaze. Just water, please. Melissa poured it, her movements brisk, then turned to Lily. And for you, sweetheart? Lily looked up shyly. Can I have juice? Melissa's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she reached for the orange juice. But her voice carried a hint of mockery, subtle but sharp enough for Rebecca to notice. Of course. We wouldn't want you missing out. Rebecca's cheeks burned again. She accepted the drinks quietly, too tired to fight. But Daniel's voice came from across the aisle, low and steady. She asked politely, You don't need to speak down to her. Melissa froze. The passengers nearby looked up. Rebecca's eyes widened in disbelief. Again, this stranger, this billionaire, was standing up for her. Melissa's jaw clenched. She forced a smile and muttered, Enjoy your drinks, and pushed the cart down the aisle. Rebecca stared at her cup of water, torn between gratitude and unease. She leaned toward Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper. You didn't have to do that. Daniel's expression softened. Yes, I did. Rebecca swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She turned back to Lily, but her mind was spinning. Who was this man? Why did he care? Hours passed. The plane hummed steadily. Passengers lulled into quiet. Lily fell asleep against her mother's shoulder, her small breaths even and peaceful. Rebecca should have rested too, but her thoughts wouldn't stop. Every moment of the flight replayed in her head. The humiliation, the whispers, and Daniel's sharp defense. She couldn't decide if she was grateful or embarrassed. Daniel, meanwhile, sat with his laptop open but untouched. His mind wasn't on business deals or emails. He kept glancing at the sleeping child, then at the weary mother holding her close. He had seen wealth at its ugliest, power at its most corrupt, but what he saw here was different. It was resilience. It was love. and he couldn't shake it. But peace never lasts long. 2 hours into flight, turbulence shook the cabin suddenly. Drinks spilled. Passengers gasped. The plane rattled as it hit rough air. Rebecca clutched Lily tightly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just bumps in the sky." But her own hands trembled. The attendants hurried to secure the carts. Melissa's face was pale now, her earlier smugness replaced by fear. The turbulence grew stronger. The plane dipped sharply, drawing a chorus of screams. Oxygen masks rattled slightly in their compartments. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The captain's voice boomed, tighter now. Rebecca's heart pounded. Lily whimpered, burying her face in her mother's chest. Around them, panic spread like wildfire. Daniel reached across the aisle, his steady hand gripping Rebecca's arm firmly. His eyes locked with hers. "Stay calm. Hold her tight. It will pass." Rebecca stared at him, her chest heaving, unsure whether to believe him. But something in his eyes, calm, unshaken, steadied her, even as the plane shuddered violently again. Screams echoed. A baby cried loudly in the back. And then an even sharper drop sent luggage tumbling from the overhead bins. The cabin erupted in chaos. The cabin shook so violently that it felt as though the entire plane had been grabbed by some invisible hand and rattled like a toy. Overhead bins burst open, bags tumbling into the aisles. A woman screamed as a backpack smacked against her shoulder. Another passenger yelled, "We're going down!" Rebecca's heart slammed in her chest. She curled her body protectively over Lily, whispering, "Hold on, baby. Hold on." But Lily's tiny arms clung around her neck like a vice, her frightened sobs muffled against Rebecca's sweater. The turbulence grew harsher, tossing the plane side to side. Passengers cried out, some praying loudly, others gripping armrests until their knuckles turned white. The attendants stumbled down the aisle, clutching whatever they could keep from falling. Daniel Carter's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone stay seated. Seatbelts on. Don't panic." His commanding tone carried, but fear drowned reason for many. The plane dipped sharply again, a gut-dropping plunge that sent several passengers screaming at the top of their lungs. Rebecca squeezed her eyes shut. She could hear Lily whispering through tears, "Mommy, I don't want to fall." Rebecca forced herself to answer, even though terror clawed inside her chest. "We're not falling, sweetheart. We're safe. Mommy's right here." Beside her, Daniel braced himself against the seat in front of him, calm but tense. His sharp gaze scanned the attendants, who were scrambling, their polished composure shattered. Melissa was crouched by the beverage cart, her face pale, lips trembling. Another violent jolt sent the lights flickering. Oxygen masks dropped down from the ceiling, dangling like ghostly vines. Gasps erupted. Some passengers fumbled for the masks immediately, while others froze in panic. "Mommy!" Lily cried, reaching for the dangling mask above them. Rebecca grabbed it with shaking hands and secured it over her daughter's small face before pulling down her own. The elastic snapped against her skin as she tugged it on, her breaths coming ragged through the plastic. She turned to check Daniel and froze. He wasn't reaching for his mask. Instead, he was helping an elderly man across the aisle who was too weak to pull his own down. Daniel yanked the mask loose, placed it gently over the man's face, and tightened the strap before grabbing his own. Rebecca stared in disbelief. Even in chaos, he thought of others first. The captain's voice boomed overhead, strained but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are experiencing severe turbulence. We are not in danger, but we ask everyone to stay in their seats with oxygen masks on as a precaution." The reassurance did little to soothe the panic. A baby screamed in the back. Passengers sobbed openly, and the rattling of the plane made Rebecca feel as if her bones might shake loose. Then, as suddenly as it began, the turbulence eased. The plane steadied, the violent jerks softening to faint tremors. The masks dangled, swaying gently. Passengers slowly lifted their heads, their eyes wide and glassy. Nervous laughter broke out here and there, but most were too shaken to speak. Rebecca loosened her grip on Lily just enough to stroke her daughter's hair. It's okay now, baby. The worst is over. Lily sniffled, still clinging tightly. Promise? Rebecca kissed her forehead. I promise. But deep down, Rebecca wasn't so sure. The cabin returned to a tense silence. The attendants walked the aisles again, their faces flushed with embarrassment, trying to reassure passengers. Melissa's voice was clipped as she muttered, Please remain calm. Everything is fine. Rebecca noticed a shakiness in her hands as she straightened the cart. The same woman who mocked her earlier now looked almost broken by fear. Daniel sat quietly again, his breathing steady. But Rebecca noticed his gaze shift toward her once more. For a moment, their eyes met, and she whispered a soft, Thank you. He nodded slightly, as if to say, You don't need to thank me. Lily, still clutching her hand, whispered, Mommy, I'm scared. Rebecca hugged her close. I know, baby, but we're brave, remember? The minutes stretched. Slowly, the plane returned to its rhythm. Passengers whispered each other, sharing nervous jokes to lighten the mood. Some pulled out their phones to distract themselves, though there was no signal. Rebecca leaned her head back, exhaustion weighing on her. She tried to steady her breathing, to calm her racing heart. She had lived through plenty of storms in life. Job losses, eviction notices, nights of hunger, but nothing compared to being trapped in the sky with her child's life in danger. She glanced again at Daniel. He had closed his eyes now, as if resting, but his hand tapped lightly against the armrest, a sign of tension he didn't show on his face. Rebecca couldn't help but wonder, why was he even on this flight? A man like him surely had private jets at his disposal. What made him choose to fly commercial, sitting just rows away from people like her? Her mind buzzed with questions she dared not ask. A calm hour passed. The sky outside was now streaked with soft clouds, the horizon glowing faintly with the sun. Most passengers relaxed again, though an undercurrent of fear lingered. Rebecca pulled out a small sandwich she had packed from home. It was wrapped in wax paper, slightly squished from being in the suitcase. She unwrapped it carefully and handed half to Lily. Lily took a bite and smiled weakly. Tastes like home. Rebecca chuckled softly. That's because it is. But then she felt it. The eyes of others on her again. She looked up and saw a businessman in a crisp suit wrinkling his nose at the sandwich, whispering to the woman next to him. Rebecca's stomach tightened. She knew that look, the same judgment she had felt earlier. Her cheeks flushed, and she shifted uncomfortably, trying to block Lily from their view. But before she could, Daniel leaned slightly in her direction and spoke loudly enough for others to hear. Looks better than what they're serving here. Rebecca blinked in surprise. Passengers nearby chuckled nervously. The businessman looked away, embarrassed. Rebecca's lips twitched into a small smile. Daniel winked lightly. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Ever. Rebecca's throat tightened. She whispered back, Why are you being so kind to us? Daniel's expression softened, but his eyes carried something heavy, almost painful. Because once, someone did the same for me when I needed it most. Rebecca's breath caught. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the plane shuddered again. This time, it wasn't turbulence. It was sharper, like something striking against metal. The cabin lights flickered once more, and a murmur spread through the passengers. The captain's voice came back, strained and urgent. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are experiencing a technical issue. Flight attendants, secure the cabin immediately. Gasps erupted. Rebecca clutched Lily tighter. Daniel sat upright, his sharp gaze flicking toward the windows, then back toward the crew. Rebecca's pulse raced. She could feel it in her bones. This wasn't just another bump. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The attendants scrambled, their voices louder now, telling passengers to stay calm. But panic spread quickly. And then, a sound no passenger ever wants to hear. A loud bang reverberated from beneath the plane, followed by a metallic screech. The entire aircraft lurched. Passengers screamed again. Rebecca's heart slammed in her chest. She pulled Lily close, whispering, "Hold on, baby, hold on." Daniel leaned across the aisle, his eyes locked on hers. For the first time since the flight began, his calm mask cracked just slightly. "This isn't normal," he muttered. The plane shuddered again, dropping sharply for a few seconds before leveling. Overhead bins popped open, more luggage crashing down. Oxygen masks swayed violently, though they hadn't been released again. The captain's voice returned, rushed and urgent. "Brace for possible emergency procedures. Flight attendants, prepare the passengers." The cabin erupted in chaos. People cried, prayed, clutched one another. Rebecca's heart sank. Lily sobbed, terrified. And as Rebecca tried to steady her daughter's breathing, her eyes darted back to Daniel. The billionaire's jaw was clenched, his eyes burning with something fierce. Not fear, but determination. And in that moment, Rebecca knew. Whatever was about to happen next, he wasn't going to let them face it alone. The words from the captain still echoed in the cabin like thunder. "Brace for possible emergency procedures. Flight attendants, prepare the passengers." For a second, silence gripped the plane. Then chaos exploded. People screamed. Others shouted questions the attendants couldn't answer. A man in the back cried out, "We're going to crash," while another passenger tried to hush him, only to break down and sob himself. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard it hurt. She clutched Lily tighter, her arms wrapped protectively around her trembling daughter. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Just hold on tight." Lily's small voice cracked through tears. "Mommy, are we going to fall from the sky?" Rebecca forced her lips to move, though terror gripped her throat. "No, sweetheart. The pilots know what they're doing. We're safe." But deep down, Rebecca wasn't sure she believed her own words. The plane jolted again, a deep shudder rolling through the cabin. Overhead bins burst open, sending a shower of bags into the aisle. A small suitcase tumbled dangerously close to Rebecca, but before it could hit her, a strong hand shot out and shoved it aside. Daniel Carter. He leaned across the aisle, his eyes sharp, voice steady despite the chaos. "Keep her head down. Protect her arms." Rebecca nodded quickly, pulling Lily into her lap, shielding her as best she could. Around them, attendants scrambled, shouting instructions over the noise. "Brace position. Heads down, hands over your heads. Stay calm." Melissa's voice cracked as she repeated the command. Her earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by pale-faced panic. She tried to sound professional, but her trembling hands gave her away. Passengers fumbled, some too panicked to follow instructions. Daniel stood briefly, towering over the seats despite the turbulence. "Listen to them. Heads down, hands over your heads, now." His voice was so commanding that people obeyed almost instinctively. Even in this chaos, his presence cut through fear like steel. Rebecca bent forward, wrapping herself around Lily, whispering, "You're safe. Mommy's here. Close your eyes, baby." The roar of the engines grew louder, uneven, as though something deep within the plane was struggling. Rebecca's stomach dropped with each sudden dip, her mind screaming prayers she couldn't form into words. Then silence. Lily cried into her chest, her little fingers clawing desperately at Rebecca's shirt. The captain's panicked voice still echoed in her ears. "Abort! Abort! We've lost hydraulics." Hydraulics. The word didn't mean much to Rebecca, but the terror in the captain's voice told her enough. It was bad. Very bad. The plane jolted again, a violent shudder that rattled the overhead bins and sent loose belongings tumbling into the aisle. A laptop bag slammed against Rebecca's leg, but she barely felt it. Her entire world was a trembling child in her arms. Across the aisle, Daniel gripped his seat with one hand and Rebecca's arm with the other. His jaw was clenched, eyes sharp, as though he could hold the plane steady by sheer will. "Stay down," he barked over the roar. "Don't move. Whatever happens, don't let go of her." Rebecca nodded frantically, though fear made her vision swim. Around them, the cabin dissolved into chaos. A man 2 rows back shouted, "We're going to crash." His voice cracked, raw with terror. Others screamed prayers. Some begged the attendants for answers. Melissa, strapped into her jump seat at the front, looked frozen. Her eyes were wide, her lips moving silently, her hands gripping the harness so tight her knuckles turned white. The descent grew steeper. Rebecca could feel it in her bones, the way her body pressed into the seatbelt, the way her ears popped painfully. Through the window, the ground rushed closer, patches of green and gray, highways like thin veins, buildings like toy blocks. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Please, God, not like this. Not like this. The plane lurched again, then suddenly leveled, jerking violently but steadying, as if some unseen hand yanked it back up. Passengers screamed from the whiplash. A few cried out in pain, but the nose of the plane lifted and the terrifying plunge slowed. The alarm continued to blare, but the descent wasn't as sharp anymore. The plane was still losing altitude, but not free-falling. Rebecca's chest heaved with shallow breaths. Lily whimpered, clinging tighter. Daniel's grip on her arm didn't loosen until the plane leveled enough that the pressure eased. Finally, the captain's voice cut through the alarm. His tone was strained, but he was back in control. This is your captain. We have regained partial control of the aircraft. We are not landing yet. We are circling to stabilize. Remain calm. Remain in your seats. The alarm cut off with a shrill click, leaving only the sound of sobs and ragged breathing. For a moment, Rebecca couldn't move. She held Lily, rocking her slightly, whispering words she wasn't sure Lily could even hear. You're safe. We're safe. Mommy's here. Just breathe, baby. Just breathe. Lily sniffled, pressing her face deeper into her mother's chest. Her voice was muffled but small. Mommy, I don't want to die. Rebecca's heart shattered. She pressed her lips to Lily's hair, tears spilling freely now. You won't. I promise you won't. Mommy won't let that happen. Her words were fierce, desperate. She didn't care if they were lies. Daniel leaned back against the seat, his chest rising and falling heavily. He ran a hand over his face, then glanced at Rebecca and Lily. She held on, he said quietly. That's all that matters right now. Rebecca looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. What's happening? Do you know? Daniel's expression was grim. Hydraulics control the movement. If they're failing, landing's not simple. They can still fly, but steering, braking, those things get harder. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Harder? You mean they might not be able to stop? Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. That's one risk. Her stomach dropped again, but she forced herself to stay steady for Lily's sake. Minutes stretched into hours, or at least it felt that way. In truth, only 15 minutes had passed since the aborted landing, but the weight of fear slowed time itself. The captain updated again, his voice carefully measured. We are in communication with ground control. Fire and rescue teams are preparing on the runway. We will attempt another landing shortly. Please continue to follow instructions from your flight attendants. The words fire and rescue made several passengers gasp. One woman broke into sobs so loud the attendant had to kneel beside her. A man near the back shouted angrily, demanding to know what was happening. Melissa finally unstrapped herself and stumbled into the aisle. Her hands still shook, but she raised her voice. Everyone listen. The crew is trained for emergencies. Stay calm. Stay seated. We need to prepare for another landing attempt. Her voice cracked halfway through, betraying her fear. But somehow, her vulnerability made her more believable than her earlier arrogance. Passengers clung to her words, desperate for any anchor of authority. Rebecca focused on Lily. She stroked her hair, whispered a story about a princess who always found her way home, even when storms tried to stop her. Lily sniffled but listened, her breathing slowing a little. Does the princess have wings like a plane? Rebecca forced a smile. Yes, baby, and her wings are strong. Strong enough to take her home. Daniel watched quietly, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned slightly closer. You're keeping her calm. That helps more than you know. Rebecca swallowed hard. I'm trying, but inside She shook her head, unable to finish. Daniel's voice was steady. Fear's normal. What matters is what you do with it. Right now, you're doing exactly what she needs. His words gave her something solid to hold onto in the sea of panic. The intercom buzzed again. The captain's voice came sharp and final. Brace for landing. This is not a drill. Flight attendants, take your seats. The cabin erupted in fresh cries. Rebecca bent forward instantly, pulling Lily with her. Okay, baby, remember what we practiced? Head down, hands over your head. Like a ball, okay? Lily obeyed shakily, tucking herself small against her mother. Rebecca curved her body protectively around her, every muscle taut. Across the aisle, Daniel braced hard, his eyes fixed forward. His voice cut through the panic one last time. Stay strong. We've got this. The engines roared louder. The descent grew sharper. The ground rushed closer. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break. She whispered over and over, I love you, Lily. I love you. I love you. The wheels screeched as they touched the runway. Then the plane swerved violently to the left. Screams exploded. The force slammed Rebecca against the seat, Lily's cry muffled under her arms. The aircraft bounced hard, tilted dangerously, then slammed down again. Sparks erupted outside the window. Rebecca's vision blurred from the force. She couldn't tell if they were slowing down or spinning out of control. Then came the voice no one wanted to hear, shouted, raw, panicked. Fire on the left engine. Evacuate! Evacuate! The screech of metal against asphalt split the air. The plane shuddered violently as sparks lit up the window beside Rebecca. She barely had time to register the blinding flash when a voice bellowed to the cabin, raw, urgent, and terrified. Fire on the left engine. Evacuate! Evacuate now! Panic detonated like a bomb. Passengers leapt from their seats, clawing at overhead bins, shoving into the aisle despite the shrill command to stay calm. Rebecca tightened her grip on Lily and forced her head up. Smoke was already seeping into the cabin, acrid and suffocating. The air burned her throat. Mommy! Lily coughed, her eyes wide and wet. I've got you, Rebecca choked out, shielding her daughter's face with her sleeve. Her heart hammered, but she pushed the fear down. There was no time to freeze. Daniel was already on his feet, towering over the crush of bodies. His voice cut through the screams like a blade. Stay low. Move to the exits. Don't push. Don't you dare push. But panic made animals of people. A man shoved past a young woman, nearly knocking her into the aisle. Another yanked his bag from the overhead compartment, ignoring the attendant's furious cries to leave everything behind. Leave your luggage, one flight attendant screamed, but her words were drowned by the chaos. Rebecca looked to the front. The main exit door was open, the inflatable slide already deployed. Bright daylight poured in, but smoke curled thicker near the left side, exactly where the engine burned. Melissa stood frozen by the door, one hand gripping the wall, her face pale as paper. She stared at the flames outside, paralyzed. Move them out! Another attendant shouted at her, but Melissa didn't respond. Daniel's jaw clenched. He vaulted into the aisle and pushed his way forward, using his shoulders to clear a path. He turned back briefly, locking eyes with Rebecca. Stay right behind me. Don't let go of her. Rebecca nodded, adrenaline surging. She bent low, clutching Lily tight against her chest, and began forcing her way into the aisle. People pressed in from all sides, arms flailing, voices shrieking. Someone's elbow clipped her cheek, but she didn't falter. Excuse me. Please, my child, she cried. Most ignored her. One woman sneered, We all have problems, before shoving forward. Daniel grabbed the woman by the arm and shoved her aside with controlled force. She's coming through. Move. Rebecca didn't stop to thank him. She pushed through the gap he'd made, her lungs searing with smoke. Lily whimpered against her shoulder, trembling. The line at the exit bottlenecked. Passengers hesitated at the open door, terrified by the sight of flames licking the wing. The slide billowed downward, but fear rooted them in place. Go! 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 The attendant at the front screamed, her voice hoarse. Finally, a man jumped, tumbling down the slide. A woman followed, shrieking as she landed. That broke the hesitation, and soon people began flinging themselves out in a frantic rush. Rebecca's turn was coming. She glanced back. The aisle behind them was a storm of bodies, passengers pushing, some crying, some praying, some cursing. And in the middle of it, Daniel's broad frame cut a path, keeping them from being crushed. He reached Rebecca's side just as she stepped to the door. Smoke rolled in from the burning engine. The heat singed her skin. "Go!" Daniel barked. Rebecca clutched Lily tighter. She crouched low, placed one hand on the frame, and hurled herself forward. The world blurred, air rushing, Lily screaming, until they slammed onto the slide and slid violently downward. They hit the ground hard. Rebecca twisted to shield Lily, pain shooting through her shoulder. But they were out. They were alive. Rebecca gasped for air, coughing violently. Around her, evacuees stumbled away from the plane, some collapsing on the tarmac, others dragging loved ones. Sirens wailed in the distance. She looked up just in time to see Daniel burst from the slide, landing heavily beside them. He grabbed Rebecca's arm, hauling her to her feet. "Move away from the plane. Run." Rebecca staggered, her legs weak, but she forced him forward. Lily clung to her neck, sobbing. The heat behind them intensified. The left engine was fully engulfed now, flames climbing high, black smoke boiling upward. Fire trucks sped toward the aircraft, but Rebecca's eyes widened. Half the cabin was still full of passengers. She could see faces at the windows, pale and desperate, pounding on the glass. And then she saw it. Smoke pouring not just on the left, but now seeping from beneath the fuselage. The fire was spreading. Daniel cursed under his breath. They won't all make it. Rebecca froze, horror clawing at her chest. But they have to. My God, they have to. Screams echoed from inside the plane. The rear exit door was jammed. People pounded at it, but it wouldn't budge. Daniel turned, scanning quickly. His mind was racing, calculating. Then his eyes locked on Rebecca. "We're going back in." Her blood ran cold. "What?" "No, Daniel, no." "Lily." He shook his head fiercely. "You stay here with her." "I'll go." But Lily's tiny arms clutched tighter, sensing the danger. "No, don't leave." Rebecca's heart twisted. She couldn't let Daniel go in alone, not when he'd already risked everything for them, and not when human beings were trapped inside, suffocating, burning. Her voice shook, but her spine straightened. "Then I'm coming too." Daniel's eyes flared, half anger, half respect. "Rebecca, don't waste time arguing. Let's move." She thrust Lily into the arms of a woman nearby, a stranger who had collapsed but still clung to her wits. "Please, hold her. Don't let her out of your sight." Lily screamed, "Mommy, no." Rebecca kissed her daughter's forehead fiercely, tears burning her eyes. "I'll be right back, baby. I swear it." Then she turned and ran with Daniel, straight back toward the burning plane. The heat grew unbearable as they approached the exit slide. Flames roared louder, smoke curling thick enough to sting their eyes. But Daniel climbed first, hauling himself back up the slide, then reaching down to pull Rebecca after him. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. Smoke choked the air, visibility fading. Passengers screamed, some trapped between rows, others pounding on sealed exits. Rebecca coughed violently, her eyes watering. "Which way?" Daniel pointed toward the rear. "Back exit's jammed. We clear it or those people die." Rebecca nodded, fear forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. Together they shoved down the aisle, pushing past panicked passengers. A man grabbed Rebecca's arm, pleading, "Help me, please," but Daniel pulled her free. At the rear, the door handle was twisted, jammed. An attendant pounded it uselessly, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "It's stuck. It won't open," she cried. Daniel shoved her aside, his muscles strained as he wrenched the handle, kicking at the door with brutal force. The metal groaned, but refused to budge. Smoke thickened, filling their lungs, making Rebecca's chest burn. People coughed and gagged behind them, some collapsing into the aisles. Daniel roared with effort and slammed his shoulder against the door. Once, twice. On the third strike, it gave way, bursting open with a screech. Cool air rushed in. Passengers surged forward, nearly trampling one another in desperation. Daniel grabbed two by the collars and shoved them toward the inflatable slide. "Go. Now!" Rebecca turned, grabbing arms, pushing people forward, shouting, "Don't stop! Keep moving!" The cabin emptied in a storm of bodies. Rebecca helped drag a boy who had collapsed, coughing, to the exit. Daniel carried an older woman on his back. The smoke was unbearable now. Flames licked at the ceiling panels. Time was running out. Rebecca staggered to the exit again, her lungs screaming for air. Most passengers had fled, but a cry stopped her cold. A child's voice. "Help! Somebody help!" Rebecca spun. Through the haze, she saw him. A boy no older than Lily, trapped between two jammed seats near the middle of the cabin. His tiny hands waved desperately through the smoke. Without thinking, Rebecca charged back in. "Rebecca!" Daniel roared, but she ignored him. Her heart was louder than her fear. She dropped to her knees, crawling under the thick smoke, reaching for the boy. "Hold on, sweetheart. I'm coming." Her fingers found his, small and trembling. She yanked, but the seatbelt was tangled around his leg. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the buckle, coughing violently. Finally, it snapped free. She hauled the boy into her arms, stumbling to her feet. Her vision swam, but she staggered toward the glowing light of the exit. Daniel appeared through the smoke, grabbing her arm. Together they half-dragged, half-stumbled out the door. They slid down the chute, crashing hard onto the tarmac. Rebecca clutched the boy tight, gasping desperately for clean air. Sirens wailed louder. Firefighters sprayed water at the raging flames. Evacuees sobbed, hugging one another, collapsing onto the asphalt. Rebecca barely noticed. She turned wildly, searching. Lily, her daughter, was there, still clinging to the stranger's arms, screaming for her mother. Rebecca dropped the boy gently, then sprinted, scooping Lily up and crushing her against her chest. "I told you, baby. I came back. Mommy came back." Lily sobbed into her neck, trembling. Daniel staggered beside them, coughing, his face streaked with soot. He locked eyes with Rebecca, and for a moment, despite the chaos, they shared an unspoken truth. They had fought through hell together. But then, a deafening explosion rocked the ground. The left engine blew, sending a fireball across the tarmac. Shrapnel tore through the air, slamming into the asphalt only yards away. Screams erupted again. Firefighters shouted orders. And in the madness, Rebecca realized something horrifying. The explosion had ignited spilled fuel, and flames were racing across the ground, straight toward a group of survivors huddled near the wing. And she, Lily, and Daniel were standing directly in its path. The ground shook beneath their feet. A wall of fire erupted from the shattered engine, rolling outward like a living beast. Flames snaked across the tarmac, devouring the trail of fuel that spilled from the ruptured wing. Rebecca froze, clutching Lily tight against her chest. Heat licked her face, the smell of burning jet fuel clawing her lungs. The fire raced faster than she could think. "Move!" Daniel's roar snapped her out of it. His arm wrapped around her shoulder, dragging her forward. The survivors scattered in every direction, shrieking, stumbling over luggage and one another. Some fell to their knees, crawling on the asphalt. Others ran blindly, crashing into each other in their desperation to escape. Firefighters screamed orders as they uncoiled hoses, streams of water and foam blasting into the inferno. But the fire was too fast. It was coming straight at them. "Run for the grass." "Away from the wing," one firefighter bellowed through his mask. Rebecca's legs jolted into motion. She sprinted, every muscle screaming, Lily clinging like a second heartbeat against her chest. The roar of fire swallowed everything else, the sirens, the shouts, the sobs. Behind them, a woman screamed. Rebecca risked a glance back. An older man had stumbled, his ankle twisted beneath him. The fire was nearly on him. Her instinct split her apart. Lily, the man. She couldn't save both. Her body faltered, but Daniel didn't. He tore away from her side, sprinting back toward the fallen man. With a grunt, he hoisted him up across his shoulders, then ran, the flames chasing at his heels. "Go, Rebecca! Don't stop!" he roared. Her throat tightened. She forced her legs harder, lungs searing as they reached the grass beyond the tarmac. She collapsed to her knees, clutching Lily, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel staggered up moments later, dumping the older man onto the ground before collapsing himself. His chest heaved, sweat and soot streaking his face. Rebecca crawled to him, touching his arm. "You're insane," she rasped, tears in her eyes. He coughed, managed a wry half-smile. "You'd have done the same." Her heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to cling to her daughter and say she never would have risked herself like that. But deep down, she knew he was right. Around them, chaos still reigned. Firefighters fought the blaze, foam spraying in massive arcs. Survivors huddled together in the grass, coughing, trembling, some screaming for missing loved ones. Rebecca rocked Lily in her arms, whispering over and over, "It's okay, baby, it's okay." But her own voice shook. Minutes crawled by, though each felt like an hour. Finally, a sharp whistle cut through the air. "Contained!" one firefighter shouted. "Left engine fire is under control." A cheer rose weakly from the survivors, but it died quickly. The air still reeked of burning fuel, smoke curling into the sky. The wreckage of the plane sat smoldering, half-burned and blackened. Rebecca buried her face in Lily's hair, trembling with relief. They had survived again, but the relief was short-lived. An attendant staggered forward, soot streaking her uniform, her face streaked with tears. She clutched a clipboard, her voice hoarse. "Roll call," she gasped. "We need to know who's still missing." Names were shouted, some answered, some not. Survivors lifted shaky hands, called out loved ones, clung tighter when they realized who was safe. Rebecca's stomach knotted as she waited. She held Lily close, whispering her own name when asked. Daniel answered for himself, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. But as the list went down, a tension began to ripple through the group. People turned to one another, whispering. Finally, the attendant's voice cracked. "We're missing one of the crew." Head snapped up. Rebecca's breath caught. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Who?" he demanded. The attendant's lips trembled. "Melissa. She never came out." Gasps spread like wildfire. The frozen attendant, the one who had mocked Rebecca, who had faltered when the fire first erupted, was still inside the wreckage. Rebecca's stomach churned. The thought of anyone left behind in that burning husk made her blood run cold. A firefighter swore, "We can't risk going in. The structure's unstable. It'll collapse any minute." Rebecca's pulse raced. She remembered Melissa's face, pale and trembling, her body locked in fear. She remembered the sneer, the mocking words. But she also remembered her eyes, wide with the same terror that had gripped them all. She turned to Daniel. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with conflict. "She's alive," Rebecca whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know she is." Daniel's jaw flexed. He didn't answer. The attendant with the clipboard collapsed onto her knees, sobbing. "We can't leave her." Firefighters moved to block the wreckage. "No one else goes in. It's too dangerous." Rebecca's chest heaved. Her eyes went erect, smoke still curling from its shattered frame. Melissa might be in there, alive, waiting. Her arms tightened around Lily. The thought of leaving her daughter motherless tore her apart. But the thought of abandoning someone to burn, it made her soul ache. Daniel's hand closed around her shoulder. His grip was firm, grounding. He leaned close, his voice low, urgent. "Rebecca, don't even think it." But she was thinking it, and the fire was still burning. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She never came out. Rebecca's heart pounded. The smoldering plane loomed behind a line of firefighters, smoke billowing from its torn fuselage. Flames still licked along the wing, casting a ghastly orange glow across the tarmac. Melissa was still inside. "No one goes in," the lead firefighter barked, his mask muffling his voice. "It's too unstable. The whole fuselage could go at any second." The crowd of survivors erupted into cries and protests. Some shouted Melissa's name. Others clung to each other, shaking their heads. Rebecca held Lily tighter, her body trembling, her daughter's small arms wrapped around her neck. her face pressed into her shoulder. Lily was safe, alive, but Melissa... Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. How long before it collapses? The firefighter hesitated, then spat out. Minutes. Maybe less. Daniel's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to Rebecca, then to Plain. He didn't have to say anything. She could read his thoughts as if they were her own. She shook her head, clutching Lily tighter. No, don't even think about it. But the thought was already alive, burning hotter than the fire itself. The firefighter stepped forward, lifting a hand to block the path. Sir, I said no one goes in. We'll do what we can, but... Daniel didn't wait for him to finish. He shoved the man aside, his stride purposeful, his eyes locked on the jagged opening of the fuselage. Daniel. Rebecca's voice broke. The firefighter grabbed his arm. Daniel ripped it free with surprising strength, his voice a low growl. I'm not leaving her to die in there. Rebecca's throat closed. Her instinct screamed at her to stop him. Lily's sobs shook against her chest. She couldn't lose him too, not after everything. But the image of Melissa's terrified face, frozen in the aisle during the evacuation, burned in her mind. She had mocked Rebecca. Yes, she had sneered at her clothes, her poverty. But none of that mattered now. She was still a human being, and she was still alive in there. Rebecca pressed a trembling kiss to Lily's hair, then gently handed her to one of the other survivors, a young woman clutching her own toddler. Please, Rebecca whispered, her voice cracking. Don't let her out of your sight. The woman nodded, wide-eyed, pulling Lily close. Rebecca turned and ran. Rebecca, Daniel barked as she caught up to him. She met his eyes, breathless, terrified, but resolute. You're not doing this alone. For a moment, he stared at her, something fierce and conflicted sparking in his gaze. Then, with a tight nod, he grabbed her hand. Together, they sprinted toward the wreckage. Shouts erupted behind them. Firefighters cursing, survivors crying out, but the roar of flames swallowed everything. The heat hit them like a wall as they reached the jagged opening. Smoke poured out in choking waves. Daniel pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth, then yanked Rebecca down low. Stay under the smoke. Move fast. She nodded, her lungs already screaming as they ducked inside. The world shifted instantly into a nightmare. The cabin was unrecognizable. Charred seats, shattered panels, flames still flickering along the walls. Smoke clawed at their eyes, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Every step crunched over broken glass and debris. Melissa! Daniel's voice thundered, muffled by the smoke. Where are you? A faint cry answered. Weak. Broken. Help! Rebecca's heart leapt. She stumbled forward, nearly tripping over a twisted seat frame. This way. They followed the voice, deeper into the wreckage. The smoke grew thicker, the heat unbearable. Rebecca coughed violently, her lungs searing. Her body screamed to turn back, but she pushed on. Finally, through the haze, they saw her. Melissa lay pinned between two collapsed seats, her uniform torn, soot smeared across her face. Her leg was trapped under twisted metal. She was shaking, her eyes wide with terror. Please, she gasped, her voice breaking. Don't leave me. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, assessing the wreckage. He grabbed hold of the metal frame, pinning her leg, and strained, muscles bulging. It didn't budge. Rebecca crouched beside him, coughing, gripping Melissa's hand. We're here. We're not leaving you. Tears spilled down Melissa's smoke-streaked cheeks. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry, she whispered hoarsely, for what I said. I was wrong. I was so stupid. Rebecca's chest tightened. This wasn't the moment for anger or pride. She squeezed Melissa's hand harder. Save your breath. You're going to make it. Daniel grunted, straining against the twisted frame. It groaned, shifted slightly, but held fast. He cursed, sweat dripping down his soot-streaked face. Rebecca glanced around desperately. Her eyes landed on a broken armrest, jagged metal exposed. She grabbed it, wedging it under the frame like a lever. Help me? Daniel caught on instantly. Together, they shoved downward, the metal shrieking as it bent. With a final groan, the wreckage shifted just enough for Melissa to pull her leg free. She cried out in pain, clutching at her ankle. Blood streaked her torn stockings, but she was free. Daniel hauled her up, slinging her arm over his shoulder. "Move!" Rebecca ran ahead, clearing debris, guiding them toward the faint outline of the exit. The smoke was heavier now, suffocating. Each breath burned like fire. They were only yards away when a sharp crack split the air. Rebecca froze. Her eyes darted upward. The ceiling above them sagged, flames eating through the overhead compartments. A low, guttural groan reverberated through the fuselage. "Go!" Daniel shouted, pushing Melissa toward the exit. Rebecca stumbled forward, her vision swimming. They were almost there. Almost. The explosion hit like a thunderclap. A fireball erupted from the rear of the plane, a shockwave blasting through the cabin. The force hurled Rebecca forward, slamming her into the floor. Her ears rang, her vision spun. She coughed, choking, her hands clawing at the ground. Smoke and fire swallowed everything. "Daniel!" she screamed, her voice raw. "Melissa!" No answer. Her head throbbed, her body trembling. Through the haze, she could just make out two shapes sprawled near the exit. They weren't moving. Rebecca's heart stopped. And then the ceiling groaned again. Another collapse imminent. She had seconds to decide. The blast had thrown her to the floor, the world erupting into fire and chaos. Rebecca's lungs screamed as she pushed herself up, her hands scraping against broken glass. The air was thick, black, impossible to breathe. Her chest burned as though flames had reached inside her body. "Daniel!" Her voice tore through her throat, raw and desperate. "Melissa!" Nothing. She blinked furiously through the haze, her vision swimming. Shapes. She had seen them. Two figures sprawled near the exit. Her pulse hammered, panic clawing at her. The ceiling groaned again, the metal above bending, fire chewing through its structure. Another explosion could come at any second. Run. Every instinct screamed at her to save herself. She could still escape. Lily was waiting for her. Lily needed her. But if she left, Daniel and Melissa were gone. Rebecca's body moved before her mind could argue. She stumbled forward, her hands groping through the smoke until they hit fabric. Daniel's jacket. He lay face down, his arms stretched toward Melissa, unmoving. "Daniel." She shook him, coughing, tears streaking through soot on her cheeks. He didn't respond. Her heart clenched with terror. She slipped her arms under his shoulders, heaving with every ounce of strength she had. His body was heavy, limp, but she dragged him toward the glowing light of the exit. The flames roared louder. Something crashed behind her, a panel slamming to the floor with a deafening clang. Heat seared her skin, the smoke clawing into her throat. She coughed violently, nearly collapsing. "Not yet. Don't you dare stop." Her gaze flicked to the side. Melissa. The flight attendant lay twisted on the floor, one arm feebly raised, her lips moving soundlessly. Rebecca dropped Daniel just inside the exit's reach, then staggered back into the inferno. Melissa's eyes locked on hers, wide, terrified. "Please," she mouthed. Rebecca crouched, hooked her arms under Melissa's, and pulled. The younger woman cried out in pain, her ankle dragging uselessly. Rebecca grit her teeth, her body screaming in protest. The ceiling shrieked above, another piece tearing free. A wave of fire swept across the cabin. Rebecca screamed and pushed harder, dragging Melissa across the floor inch by agonizing inch. Her body felt like it was splitting apart, but she didn't let go. At the exit, a shadow appeared, a firefighter, mask gleaming in the firelight. His voice thundered above the chaos. "Here! This way!" Rebecca collapsed forward, shoving Melissa toward him. Strong arms grabbed the attendant, hauling her out. Rebecca reached back, grabbing Daniel's jacket, pulling with a strangled cry. Another pair of hands seized him, dragging his unconscious form out of the wreckage. Rebecca's strength gave out. Her body crumpled, half inside, half outside the torn fuselage. "Pull her to!" another voice shouted. Hands grabbed her arms, yanking her clear just as the ceiling gave way. A final thunderous crash roared behind her as the fuselage collapsed in a storm of fire and debris. Rebecca hit the ground hard, rolling onto her back, gasping desperately for air. The night sky above was blurred through her tears, but it was sky, clean, open air. She coughed violently, every breath tearing through her raw throat. Voices swirled around her. Shouts. Orders. The hiss of hoses. Get medics here. Unconscious male, heavy smoke inhalation. Second victim, leg injury, possible fractures. Rebecca's head turned weakly. She saw Daniel's body on the ground, firefighters kneeling over him, pressing oxygen to his face. He didn't move. No! Her whisper cracked. Too faint to carry. Melissa lay nearby, clutching her leg, tears streaking her soot-covered face. She muttered broken apologies, words tumbling incoherently as paramedics tried to calm her. And then, Mommy! The cry pierced through everything. Rebecca's head snapped toward it. Lily! Her little girl broke free from the arms of the woman, holding her, and ran, stumbling across the tarmac. Rebecca sat up, her body screaming in protest, and caught her daughter in her arms. She crushed her close, sobbing into her hair. I'm here, she whispered fiercely. I'm here, baby. Lily clung to her, trembling. Don't leave me again. I won't, Rebecca choked. I promise. Never again. But as she held her daughter, her eyes slid back to Daniel. He still hadn't moved. Medics swarmed him, checking his pulse, shouting instructions. Rebecca's heart pounded with dread. She wanted to run to him, to take his hand, to beg him to wake up, but Lily's small arms anchored her, holding her in place. The seconds dragged like hours. Finally, the medics lifted Daniel onto a stretcher, strapping him down, oxygen mask still pressed to his face. His chest rose faintly, shallow but steady. He's alive. One medic called, though his tone was grim. Severe smoke inhalation. Possible head trauma. He needs immediate care. Relief washed over Rebecca so intensely it hurt. Tears blurred her vision as she clutched Lily tighter. Melissa was loaded onto another stretcher, her leg hastily splinted. She reached a trembling hand toward Rebecca as they carried her past. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice broken. I was so wrong. Rebecca didn't answer. She simply nodded, too drained to speak. They were rushed toward emergency tents set up near the edge of the runway. Inside, the chaos continued. Doctors shouting, supplies clattering, patients groaning. Rebecca sank onto a cot, Lily still in her arms, her body trembling uncontrollably. Every muscle ached, her lungs burned, her skin stung where flames had kissed it. But none of it mattered. She was alive. Lily was alive. Melissa was alive. Daniel. Her eyes followed as they wheeled him behind the curtain. She could just make out his still form. Doctors working frantically over him. Rebecca's chest tightened, fear clawing at her again. She rocked Lily gently, whispering words she didn't fully hear herself saying. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning. At last, the curtain shifted. A doctor stepped out, his expression grave, his gloves stained with soot. His eyes met Rebecca's across the chaos. And in that moment, she knew the words she had been dreading were coming. The hospital lights hummed faintly, a constant, sterile reminder of survival. Days had passed since the fire. Yet for Rebecca, time felt like a blurred echo, each hour bleeding into the next. She sat by Daniel's bedside, Lily curled against her side, her daughter finally asleep after another night of waking in tears. The soft rise and fall of Daniel's chest beneath the sheets was the only thing that kept her grounded. He had survived. Barely. Smoke inhalation, cracked ribs, burns along his left arm. The doctors had spoken in clipped tones, warning of complications, of how close he had been to slipping away. Rebecca had listened with clenched fists, her heart sinking at each word, until finally one phrase had broken through the haze. He will live. Now. Watching him sleep, Rebecca's relief warred with something darker. Fear. Every labored breath he took felt like a thread that could snap. She couldn't shake the memory of dragging him out of the flames, the weight of his body in her arms, lifeless and heavy. Lily stirred in her lap, murmuring something incoherent. Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair, her own throat tightening. The child hadn't spoken much since the incident, her wide eyes haunted by things no child should have seen. Rebecca pressed her lips to Lily's forehead. How do I keep her safe now? How do I keep any of us safe? The door creaked. Rebecca's head snapped up, her muscles tensing. A nurse entered, pushing a tray, but behind her stood someone unexpected. Melissa. The younger woman leaned heavily on crutches, her leg wrapped and braced. Bruises shadowed her face, her skin pale. She looked smaller, diminished somehow, her usual confidence stripped away. Her eyes met Rebecca's, and she hesitated. May I? Rebecca's first instinct was no, to protect Lily, to shield this fragile pocket of calm. But Daniel stirred faintly at the sound, and Lily remained asleep, oblivious. Rebecca exhaled. 5 minutes. Melissa hobbled inside, lowering herself awkwardly into the chair opposite. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady beep of Daniel's monitors. I want to thank you, Melissa said finally, her voice rough, for pulling me out. You didn't have to. Rebecca studied her. The guilt in Melissa's eyes was raw, unmasked. You're right, Rebecca said evenly. I didn't. Melissa winced, but she didn't look away. I was wrong about you. About so much. I thought I had control, that I understood what mattered. But when the fire came, I realized how foolish I've been, how selfish. Rebecca said nothing, waiting. Melissa's gaze dropped to her hands. I've told the investigators everything, about the cabin crew's mistakes, about what I saw before the blast. There are things they need to know, things I ignored because I was too wrapped up in myself. Rebecca's brows drew together. What things? Melissa hesitated, her lips tightening. There was a man, passenger in the back. He was nervous, shifty. He kept fiddling with something under his jacket. I thought he was just scared of flying. But before the explosion, I swear I saw him moving toward the galley. Rebecca's blood ran cold. You told this to the authorities? Melissa nodded. Yes, they're investigating now. They think... She glanced at Daniel, then back at Rebecca. They think this was an accident. Rebecca's pulse hammered. She looked at Daniel, pale and fragile against the sheets, then at Lily, asleep and clinging to her even in dreams. Not an accident, which meant someone had done this. Deliberately. Her throat went dry. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. Because you deserve to know what you were dragged into, Melissa said. And because I don't know if I'll get another chance to make things right. Rebecca stared at her, the weight of the revelation sinking like stone. That night, Rebecca lay beside Lily on the narrow hospital cot, sleep refusing to come. Every sound in the corridor made her tense, every footstep a reminder that danger might not be finished with them. When Daniel shifted in his sleep, groaning softly, she rushed to his side. His eyes fluttered open, hazy but focused enough to find hers. You stayed, he whispered, his voice raspy. Of course I did, she whispered back, brushing his hair from his forehead. His hand found hers, weak but steady. You saved me. Rebecca's chest tightened. You would have done the same. He gave a faint smile, then winced at the pain. What happens now? She hesitated, glancing toward Lily. We heal. We protect her. And we find out who did this. Daniel's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Rebecca leaned closer, her voice a low whisper. Melissa says it was an accident. Daniel's eyes sharpened, even through the haze of medication. His grip on her hand tightened. Then we're not safe yet, he said. Rebecca swallowed hard, her resolve hardening. For the first time since the ordeal began, her fear shifted into something else, determination. Whoever had tried to destroy them wasn't finished. But neither was she, and she would not let them win. The following morning, 2 men in dark suits arrived at the hospital. Investigators. They carried files, badges, and eyes that missed nothing. Rebecca sat up straighter as they entered, her heart thudding. Mrs. Clark? The taller one asked. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the chill crawling down her spine. "We'd like to ask you some questions about the night of the incident," he said. His gaze flicked to Daniel, then to Lily. "It's important." Rebecca glanced at Daniel, who nodded faintly. She turned back to the investigators, her jaw setting. "I'll answer," she said, "but you tell me the truth in return. Was this sabotage?" The men exchanged a glance, and in the silence that followed, Rebecca knew. The hospital room no longer felt like a sanctuary. Too many strangers had come and gone in the past 24 hours, carrying clipboards, files, and questions. Questions Rebecca wasn't ready to answer, but had no choice but to face. Lily sat on the narrow cot, hugging her knees. Her wide eyes followed the men in suits, as if they were predators in her space. Rebecca sat between her daughter and Daniel, shoulders squared, hiding her own unease beneath a mask of calm. The investigators had introduced themselves as special agents under the Federal Aviation Administration Security Division, with ties to Homeland Security. Their tone was professional, clipped, yet laced with an urgency that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "We'll be brief," the taller one said, flipping open a file. "But we need clarity on what you witnessed." Rebecca's gaze flicked to Daniel. He looked pale, weak, but determined. He nodded slightly, a silent encouragement. So she began. She told him about the fire, the explosion, the chaos in the cabin. She described the smoke, the crush of bodies, the blocked exits. And finally, she repeated what Melissa had confessed. A nervous man in the rear, fumbling with something under his jacket. The shorter agent scribbled notes. The taller one leaned in. "Did you see this man yourself?" Rebecca shook her head. "No, Melissa did, but she seemed certain." The agent closed the file. "We believe her account holds weight. We've identified a passenger fitting her description. He did not survive, but what we recovered near his seat suggests this was not mechanical failure." Rebecca's breath caught. "What did you find?" The man's jaw tightened. "Components of an improvised device. It appears he intended more damage than what occurred. Something malfunctioned before his plan could fully unfold." Silence pressed down on the room. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. So it had been deliberate. Not fate, not bad luck. Someone had tried to kill them. Lily whimpered softly, pressing her face into Rebecca's arm. Daniel's hand found Rebecca's. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "Why us? Why that flight?" The agents exchanged a glance before one answered. "We don't believe you were targeted personally. This appears to be ideological. Random in choice, catastrophic in intent." Rebecca exhaled shakily, relief and dread mixing. They hadn't been chosen, yet they had suffered all the same. The interview ended soon after. The agents promised further updates, but left Rebecca with a chilling phrase: "This isn't over. Others may be involved." When the room was quiet again, Rebecca leaned back, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. Lily had crawled onto bed beside Daniel, her small frame curled against his uninjured side. He stroked her hair weakly, his expression etched with both pain and gratitude. Rebecca watched them, a lump rising in her throat. For all her fear, for all the horror burned into her memory, here was the one thing that mattered. They were alive, together. But survival wasn't the same as healing. That night, Rebecca woke to Lily's scream. Her daughter thrashed on the cot, face slick with sweat, eyes clenched shut. Rebecca rushed to her, gathering her into her arms. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. You're safe." Lily sobbed against her chest, words tumbling between gasps. "The fire, Mommy. It's coming back. It's coming for us." Rebecca's heart cracked. She rocked her gently, whispering over and over until the sobs softened into hiccups. When Lily finally slept again, Rebecca sat awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. How do I protect her from nightmares? How do I shield her from what she's seen? No answer came, only the quiet sound of Daniel's breathing, Lily's tiny hand still gripping Rebecca's shirt even in sleep. The next day brought another surprise. Melissa appeared again, this time without crutches. Her face still bore bruises, but her posture was straighter, her eyes clearer. Rebecca tensed, ready for confrontation, but Melissa only raised her hands in surrender. "I'm not here to fight. I wanted to say goodbye." Rebecca frowned. "Goodbye?" They're releasing me today, Melissa said. The investigators want me for follow-up questioning, but after that, who knows? She hesitated. I know I've made mistakes, more than I can count. But in that fire, you didn't give up on me. That means something. I don't want to waste the second chance you gave me. Rebecca studied her, torn between skepticism and unexpected respect. Melissa's arrogance was gone, replaced with humility. Perhaps pain had burned something better into her. I hope you mean that, Rebecca said finally, because life doesn't give many second chances. Melissa nodded. I do, and for what it's worth, I hope you and your daughter find peace. She left quietly, her steps echoing down the corridor until silence reclaimed the room. Rebecca exhaled, realizing some part of her had needed that closure. Days blurred into weeks. Daniel's recovery was slow, but steady. His burns healed, his lungs strengthened, though the doctors warned scars would remain. Rebecca remained by his side, juggling hospital visits, therapy sessions for Lily, and her own quiet battles with sleeplessness. Sometimes she'd find herself gripping the edge of the bed, images of fire rushing back, so vividly she could smell the smoke. Other times she'd jolt awake, convinced the room itself was burning. But always, she forced herself to breathe. For Lily, for Daniel, for herself. On the morning of Daniel's discharge, Rebecca wheeled him to the hospital corridors, Lily skipping alongside, her pigtails bouncing. The world outside felt brighter, sharper, sunlight spilling over the parking lot, air crisp against her skin. For the first time, Rebecca allowed herself to believe they might truly begin again. As they reached the car, Daniel caught her hand. His eyes, still tired but warm, searched hers. We made it, he said softly. Rebecca nodded, emotion thick in her throat. We did. He squeezed her hand. But surviving isn't enough. We have to live again. Really live. Promise me we'll try. Rebecca swallowed hard, then nodded. I promise. Lily climbed into the back seat, humming quietly to herself, a sound that felt like fragile hope. Rebecca started the car, the road ahead stretching wide and uncertain. The scars would remain in their bodies, in their dreams. But so would the strength that carried them through. As they drove away, Rebecca glanced in the rearview mirror. For the first time since the fire, she saw not just fear in her daughter's eyes, but resilience. And in that moment, Rebecca knew. Whatever shadows still lingered, whatever truths the investigation uncovered, they would face it together, because they had survived the flames. And together, they would not be broken. And that brings us to the end of the story. A journey of survival, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to face the unthinkable. For Rebecca, Daniel, and little Lily, the scars of that day will never fully fade. But through the fire, they discovered something greater than fear. The will to hold on, the power of unity, and the courage to live again. It's a reminder that life can change in a single moment. Yet even in the darkest of hours, hope can still find a way forward. Thank you for following this story until the very end.